There is a specific kind of exhaustion that no one talks about openly. It is not the exhaustion of someone who has given up. It is the exhaustion of someone who keeps trying, who sets the alarm, makes the plan, buys the journal, reads the book, starts the routine, and then, weeks later, finds themselves exactly where they started, sometimes even further back. If you have felt this, you already know what I am describing. That quiet, unsettling moment when you realize that you have been here before. That the version of you standing in front of the mirror today looks almost identical to the version who promised 6 months ago that things were going to be different. And the most disturbing part is not the failure itself. It is that you cannot explain it. You wanted it. You tried. You were not lazy or indifferent. Something pulled you back. Something you cannot name and cannot see always seems to win. Most people will go to their graves as slightly worse versions of who they could have been. Not because they did not want to change or because the information was unavailable, but because they never understood what real change actually requires. This video is not about motivation, habits, or morning routines. It is about the invisible architecture inside you that was built long before you had any say in the matter. It is about why that architecture, until it is seen directly, makes genuine change structurally impossible. Carl Jung spent his entire life studying why human beings resist transformation even when they desperately want it. What he found was not flattering, but it was true. By the end of this video, you will understand the specific psychological mechanism that keeps people locked in place, and what separates the rare few who do change from everyone else. Let us start with what most people believe change looks like. They believe it is a decision, a strong enough desire, a clear enough goal, a firm enough commitment. And so they decide. For a while it works. The behavior shifts, the routine holds, and progress appears. But then, slowly and invisibly, something begins to erode. The new behavior starts to feel foreign and exhausting, like wearing clothes that belong to someone else. One day, without fully realizing it, you are back to the old patterns and the old version of yourself. This is the cycle most people live inside their entire lives, and they blame themselves for it. They call themselves weak or fundamentally flawed, adding more effort and pressure to the next attempt. But the cycle does not break with more effort, because effort was never the problem. The problem is that what most people call change is actually just rearrangement. You move things around on the surface, adjusting schedules, environments, and goals, but underneath something remains completely untouched. Something that watches your attempts with patient indifference, knowing you will return. Carl Jung argued that the human psyche operates on levels, and the level most people are aware of is the surface. This is the conscious self, the identity you present to the world. Jung called this the persona. In ancient theater, the persona was the mask worn by actors to signal their role to the audience. What most people call their identity is not their true self. It is a carefully constructed social mask built over decades through approval, expectation, rejection, and survival. The persona is not malicious. It is adaptive. From childhood, you learned which parts of yourself earned love and safety, and which parts caused rejection and were therefore hidden. Over time, the mask became so perfectly fitted that you stopped noticing it was a mask at all. You began to believe that the persona was you. This is where the problem begins. When you decide to change, you are almost always making a decision at the level of the persona. You are updating the mask, giving it new behaviors and goals. But the mask is not the source of your patterns. The source lives somewhere the mask cannot reach. Think about this practically. You decide you will no longer react impulsively in conflict. You practice breathing techniques and do well for a while. But then a specific person or tone of voice triggers you, and before you have consciously decided anything, the old reaction is already moving through you. That is not a failure of discipline. That is the unconscious operating exactly as it was designed to. Until you understand what lives in the unconscious, you will keep losing to it. If this content is making sense to you, click the subscribe button and subscribe to the channel. We must go into the part of the psyche that most people spend their entire lives avoiding. Jung called it the shadow. The shadow is simply everything you are that you do not know you are. Every impulse you denied, every emotion you suppressed, and every version of yourself that was rejected so many times you stopped acknowledging its existence. The shadow is not your evil side. It contains both darkness and what Jung called unlived life, the potential that never had permission, and the authenticity that was trained out of you. Whatever you put into the shadow does not disappear. It goes underground, accumulates, and expresses itself in ways you do not recognize as yourself. It shows up in your reactions, your patterns, and the inexplicable repetitions of your life. The same kind of relationship ending the same way, or the same opportunity self-destructed at the same moment. You are making the same mistakes because the same unexamined force is making them on your behalf, just below the level of your awareness. Jung said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. Most people are living inside the consequences of their shadow without ever realizing it exists. They call their patterns bad luck or wrong timing. Trying to change at the surface level is like renovating a house while ignoring a cracked foundation. Eventually, the new renovations reflect the damage underneath. This is why information alone does not create change. The shadow does not respond to knowledge. It responds to consciousness, to being seen directly without flinching. Meeting it directly is incredibly difficult because it contains the things you decided long ago were too dangerous to look at. The grief you converted into ambition, the fear you converted into control, or the worthlessness you converted into achievement. These conversions protected you, but they are now the architecture of your stagnation. Every pattern in your life is leaving you a map. Every repetition is pointing at something unexamined. If surface-level change fails because it ignores the shadow, what does real change actually look like? Jung called it individuation. Not transformation or improvement, but becoming an individual. It is the process of separating what is genuinely yours from what was adopted as a survival mechanism. It means meeting yourself completely and integrating those hidden parts into a conscious, coherent whole. Individuation is not comfortable. Real change begins when you stop trying to become a better version of your persona and start asking, who am I underneath the mask? That question is dangerous because it requires you to encounter the shadow and look at the patterns you have spent your life running from. Most people will not do this, which is precisely why most people never change. It is a lack of willingness to go to the unconscious level. The few who do change developed a tolerance for internal discomfort that most people cannot sustain. They learned to sit with the shadow without immediately fleeing into distraction or the performance of being fine. They learned that the discomfort itself is the signal and the exact location of the unexamined material. Every irrational emotional reaction is a message from the shadow. Every repeated pattern is the unconscious showing you where it is still running the architecture. The few who change learn to read these signals instead of suppressing them. They ask why they reacted that way and what the pattern protects. And then they stay with the answer, even when it requires revising their entire understanding of who they are. Every genuine encounter with the shadow reduces its power over you. Every piece of unlived life brought into consciousness becomes available as energy. The person who has done this work does not look dramatically different from the outside. They do not perform their growth, but they are no longer at war with themselves or exhausted by maintaining a false persona. They changed, not their habits or schedule, but themselves. And the change held because it came from the inside. So here is the question this video leaves you with. You have spent years trying to change at the surface level, adjusting your behavior and your environment. Some of it helped, but something always pulled you back. Now you know what that something is. The question is not whether you can change, but whether you are willing to go to the level where change actually lives. Whether you are willing to meet the shadow instead of managing it. Most people are not willing, and that is not a judgment. The unconscious is powerful, and the persona offers a perfectly functional life for those who never look beneath it. But you watched this video. Something in you already knows that the surface is not where you belong. Something suspects that your patterns are not your destiny, but the unexamined architecture of a past you have not yet faced. That willingness is all that separates you from the few who change. Not talent, not discipline, but the decision to look directly at what you have been looking away from, to stop rearranging the surface and go to the foundation. When you find the answer to that question and stay with it long enough to let it transform you, you will not need to try to change. You will already be changing. Write in the comments, "I am ready to look," because the simple act of writing it is already the beginning of a different kind of consciousness. Stay with me. The next video goes into something deeper, the one idea that quietly controls how you love, how you chase your goals, and why you sometimes feel like you are working against yourself. I will see you there.